My husband called me his beautiful mystery in 5 different languages during our wedding. Little did he know that 7 years later, at a dinner with Dubai investors, I would use all 5 of those languages to unravel every secret he'd buried. And I would do it while smiling sweetly and passing the saffron rice. But let me start at what feels like the beginning. Though truly, the beginning was probably the moment I decided to shrink myself to fit his world. My name is Evelyn James, née Petronova. I was born in a small Moldovan village to a linguist mother and a folk musician father. Our home echoed with Romanian, Russian, Gagauz Turkish, Romani from my grandmother, and the French my mother insisted we learn because it's the language of diplomacy. By 16, I was fluent in all 5, and by 20, I'd added English with an accent I worked ruthlessly to smooth into international neutrality. I met Oliver James at a London diplomatic reception where I was working as an interpreter. He was 32, British-American, razor-sharp in a Savile Row suit, with that particular confidence that comes from generations of never having to question your place in the world. He watched me seamlessly switch between French, Arabic, and Russian during a tense negotiation over mineral rights, and afterward, he said the words that would define our next 7 years. "You make the complex look decorative." At 24, I mistook this for a compliment. We married 18 months later. Oliver's venture capital firm was expanding into emerging markets, and my parlor trick languages, as his mother called them, were suddenly an asset. I left my interpreting career. Why work when you can host? Oliver reasoned, and became the professional wife. I curated dinner parties for potential investors from Uzbekistan to Morocco. I remembered which diplomat was allergic to shellfish, which sheik preferred rosewater to orange blossom in his tea, which minister's wife needed discreet conversation about Swiss boarding schools for her children. And somewhere between learning to replicate Oliver's mother's dreadful beef Wellington and smiling through discussions of mining yields in Kazakhstan, I disappeared. The transformation was glacial. First, it was small surrenders. I stopped reading academic linguistics journals because Oliver found them tedious at breakfast. Then I stopped calling my childhood friend Anya in Chisinau because our rapid-fire Romanian made him feel excluded. Then I stopped writing the poetry I'd once published under a pseudonym because, as Oliver gently noted, it's a bit melancholy for our current social circle. My languages, once the core of my identity, became party tricks. "Evelyn, darling, say something in that gypsy tongue," his business partner's wife would trail over champagne, and I would oblige with a folk saying, smiling as I reduced my grandmother's language to a curiosity. The loneliness was a physical thing, a hollow behind my sternum that ached during long evenings when Oliver worked in his study. I filled it with secret projects. First, it was learning Farsi through online courses. Then it was studying quantum computing textbooks because I'd overheard Oliver dismiss it as too complex for anyone without a PhD in physics. Then, 6 months before the Dubai dinner, I began something truly subversive. I started auditing Oliver's business. It began innocently enough. He'd left a financial report open on his tablet, which synced to the cloud account I still had access to. The numbers didn't align with what he'd told me about a recent investment. A small discrepancy, but my father had been a bookkeeper before the music took over, and he'd taught me to read balance sheets alongside sheet music. That night, while Oliver slept, I accessed the server he thought I didn't know about, the one labeled James Capital Legacy, a name I'd never heard him use. What I found wasn't just discrepancy. It was an entirely parallel financial universe. Offshore holding companies, transfers to numbered accounts in Luxembourg, property purchases in Dubai and Singapore under corporate entities that didn't appear in any of our official records, and recurring payments to a woman named Layla Al-Farsi, whose LinkedIn profile identified her as a geopolitical risk analyst based in Abu Dhabi. I didn't confront him. My mother, before her early death, had told me, "Words are weapons, but silence is armor. Choose when to remove it." Instead, I armored myself with knowledge. I used my language skills to navigate foreign corporate registries. I tapped old contacts from my interpreting days who now worked in international banking. I spent 3 months building a mosaic of Oliver's shadow portfolio, all while playing my role perfectly. The decorative, slightly vague wife who was excellent with floral arrangements and seating charts. Then came the Dubai dinner invitation. "Massively important," Oliver said, adjusting his cufflinks in the mirror of our Knightsbridge apartment. "The Altagan family is considering a £200 million investment in our Central Asian fund. You remember Amir Altagan from the Ascot races last year?" I did. A shrewd man in his 50s with watchful eyes who'd asked me about Moldovan folk music while everyone else discussed horse breeding. We'd spoken in a blend of Romanian and Arabic that made Oliver visibly uncomfortable. "I'll need you to be particularly charming," Oliver continued. "Amir's bringing his sister, Zara. She's recently widowed, apparently quite involved in the family's charitable foundation. Keep her occupied with whatever it is women like to discuss. Fashion, I suppose. Or orphans." The condescension was so woven into his speech, he didn't hear it anymore. Neither did I once. Now it sounded like a bell tolling. The dinner is at Amir's private majlis in the Burj Vista. Black tie, traditional modest dress for you. And Evelyn, he turned, his expression softening into the mask I now recognized as his indulgent look. Try not to dominate the conversation with your languages this time. Last year, with the Kazakh delegation, you rather showed me up. That was the moment I decided. The precise second when the last thread of our marriage frayed to nothing. "I'll be the picture of demure," I promised, kissing his cheek. What I didn't tell him was that in the 4 weeks before the dinner, I, 1, hired a discreet Emirati investigator to look into Laila al-Farsi, 2, used my old interpreting credentials to access diplomatic databases confirming Oliver's consultancy fees from 3 governments with terrible human rights records, 3, discovered that James Capital Legacy wasn't just hiding money, it was funneling it to offshore arms of a political organization banned in 17 countries, 4, reconnected with Anya, who was now an investigative journalist with the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, 5, arranged for everything I discovered to be securely delivered to 3 different law enforcement agencies, set to release if I didn't reset the timer every 12 hours. The night of the dinner, I wore a custom-made couture abaya in midnight blue, embroidered with silver thread in patterns that echoed both Moldovan folk art and Bedouin symbolism. My hair was covered with a matching shayla, my makeup subtle except for kohl-rimmed eyes. I looked every inch the elegant, apolitical wife. Oliver approved. "You clean up beautifully," he said, as if I were a yacht he'd just had detailed. Amir Al-Tahan's penthouse occupied the top 3 floors of the Burj Vista, with a private elevator that opened directly into a vast circular room walled in glass overlooking the Persian Gulf. The floor was polished marble inlaid with brass geometric patterns. Low divans lined the perimeter, piled with silk cushions. The air smelled of oud, saffron, and immense wealth. Amir greeted us with traditional hospitality, but his eyes lingered on me a fraction longer than necessary. "Amir, you honor my home. Your presence is like the first cool breeze after a desert day." I replied in formal Arabic, using the dialect of the Gulf aristocracy. "The honor is mine, Amir. Your home is a poem written in light and space." Oliver looked momentarily surprised. My Arabic had improved since last year, but covered it with a laugh. "Careful, Amir. My wife's compliments are like her languages, dangerously charming."
Zara al-Tahan emerged from an archway. Where Amir was polished steel, Zara was Damascus silk, layered, patterned, stronger than she appeared. She was perhaps 45, with intelligent eyes and a stillness that spoke of observing far more than she revealed. "Evelyn," she said, taking both my hands, "we meet again. I've been reading about Moldovan folk music since we spoke at Ascot. The Doina morning songs remind me of our own Hida." We settled on the divans. Servants brought trays of dates, rose water-infused drinks, tiny cups of bitter Arabic coffee. The conversation began in English, the neutral territory of international business. Oliver launched into his pitch, the stability of post-Soviet markets, the mineral wealth of Central Asia, the unique positioning of Jane's capital to bridge East and West. He was brilliant, I had to admit. He wove narratives of progress and partnership that sounded both visionary and inevitable. Amir listened, nodding occasionally. Zara poured coffee with elegant precision, her eyes missing nothing. After the main course, a magnificent spread of lamb usi, stuffed vine meves, and fragrant rice, the conversation began to fracture along linguistic lines. Amir's finance director, a Lebanese man named Karim, asked Oliver a technical question about currency hedging in Russian. Oliver answered in serviceable but clumsy Russian, making 2 grammatical errors that changed the meaning of his sentence. I saw Amir's eyebrow twitch. Then Oliver, trying to recover, switched to what he thought was simple Arabic to address Amir directly, but he used a verb form that implied Amir was a subordinate rather than an equal. Amir's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Perhaps we should continue in English," he suggested mildly. But Oliver, sensing he was losing ground, made his fatal mistake. He leaned toward Amir and said in what he thought was private French, a language none of the Altahans had used all evening. "The sister is the real challenge. Widowed women in these cultures become either pious nuisances or greedy obstacles. We should structure the deal to bypass the charitable foundation entirely. Offer her a personal endowment to keep her occupied with good works." I froze, my coffee cup halfway to my lips. Amir's expression didn't change, but Zara's did. Just a flicker around the eyes. She understood French perfectly. Oliver, oblivious, continued in French. "As for my wife, she's decorative but harmless. She'll keep Zara entertained with folk songs and fabric patterns while we discuss real business." Then Karim asked a question in Turkish about regional stability. Oliver attended a response but stumbled over the conditional tense. That's when I broke my 7-year silence. In flawless Istanbul Turkish, I answered Karim's question. Citing recent IMF reports and demographic analyses Oliver had never bothered to read. Then I turned to Amir and continued in the precise classical Arabic of financial discourse, correcting Oliver's earlier error and proposing an alternative hedging strategy that accounted for karatic prohibitions on certain interest structures. The room went utterly still. Oliver stared at me as if I'd grown a second head. "Evelyn, what?" But I wasn't done. I addressed Zara in Romanian, knowing the romantic language similarity to Moldovan would make it comprehensible. "The charitable foundation isn't a sidebar, it's the heart of the deal. Any investment in Central Asia needs social license, which your foundation provides. Cutting it out isn't just insulting, it's stupid." Then back to French, directly to Oliver, my voice like shattering crystal. "And as for being decorative, mon cher mari, perhaps you should have wondered what this decoration was observing all these years while you thought I was admiring the drapes." Oliver's face cycled through shock, confusion, and dawning horror. "You, all this time? All this time," I confirmed in English for the full tableau. "While you were hiding money in Luxembourg, paying your mistress in Abu Dhabi, and funneling funds to the New Dawn movement through your legacy accounts, I was learning. I was watching. I was documenting." Amir set down his coffee cup with a precise click. "This is domestic matter?" "Not entirely," I said, switching back to Arabic. "The New Dawn movement is banned in your country, Amir. Your intelligence services have been monitoring Oliver's transactions for months. I imagine they'll be interested in my documentation."
Zara spoke for the first time in minutes, her voice calm. The money already transferred to the Luxembourg account. It was moved again this morning, to a charitable trust in my name, as it happens. Now it was my turn to be shocked. Zara smiled, a genuine expression that transformed her face. "Your investigator, the Emirati man, he works for me, has for years. When you hired him to look into Layla El-Farzi, he brought the information to me. Layla is my cousin, by the way, not Oliver's mistress, though he certainly tried. She's been feeding him false intelligence about Central Asian politics for 18 months. The room seemed to tilt. Oliver had gone pale. I don't understand." "You were never going to get our investment, Oliver," Amir said, almost kindly. "We've known about your New Dawn connections since you first approached us. We were simply waiting to see who else was involved. Your wife's investigation accelerated our timeline." I looked from brother to sister. "You used me as bait." "We used you as a mirror," Zara corrected, "to show Oliver exactly what he'd become, and to see what you would do with the truth." She paused. "The files you sent to the authorities, we intercepted them. For your protection. The people Oliver is involved with, they don't leave loose ends." Oliver was breathing rapidly. "Evelyn, whatever you think." "What I think," I said quietly, "is that for 7 years, you treated my mind as decoration and my heart as convenient real estate. You took the 5 languages that were my heritage, my soul, and made them party favors. The greatest irony is that you missed what was happening right before you because you never believed I was capable of complex thought." I stood, the silver embroidery on my abaya catching the light like chainmail. "The divorce papers will be served tomorrow. I've already filed a restraining order based on the financial fraud evidence. The apartment in London, the villa in Nice, the New York penthouse, all purchased with marital funds you hid. They're mine now." Oliver found his voice, desperation cracking through. "You can't prove any of this. In your study, behind the false panel in your walnut desk, the one you showed me years ago thinking I'd forget, there's a burner phone, the same one you used to call your New Dawn contacts. It's been transmitting to a server in Moldova for 6 weeks. My childhood friend Anya has been documenting everything." I turned to the Al-Tahans. "I apologize for the scene." Amir waved a hand. "No apology needed. This is more entertaining than any theatrical production, and more profitable." He looked at Oliver with something like pity. "Your shares in James Capital have already been frozen. Your partners were informed an hour ago. They're cooperating with authorities to save what remains of the firm." The collapse was total. Oliver James, the man who built empires in 5 time zones, crumbled into a weeping mess on a silk divan in Dubai. Zara walked me to the private elevator. "What will you do now?" "For the first time in 7 years," I said. "I have no idea, and it feels like freedom." She pressed something into my hand, a business card with only a phone number engraved in gold. "My foundation needs a director of international relations, someone who understands that language isn't just translation, it's translation of meaning, of culture,
of human experience. The salary is considerable, the work is meaningful, and you'd answer only to me. I looked at the card, then at her. Why? Because women who survive attempts to make them small, Zara said, either break or become diamonds. You've clearly chosen the latter. The divorce took 9 months. Oliver fought initially, but when Interpol and 3 national intelligence agencies became involved, his lawyers advised settlement. I received 70% of the marital assets. The court penalized him for concealment and fraud, plus ownership of the London apartment. The Al Tahan investment never went to James Capital, of course. Instead, Zara and Amir created a new fund focused on ethical development in emerging markets. I became its public face, using my languages not as party tricks, but as bridges. Oliver was arrested 6 weeks after the divorce was finalized, not for financial crimes, but for conspiracy related to the New Dawn movement's activities in Eastern Europe. He's serving 12 years in a maximum security prison in Belgium. Sometimes, in my quiet moments in the London apartment that is now truly mine, I look at the photograph from our wedding. Oliver is whispering in my ear and I'm laughing. The caption in the album reads, "The beautiful mystery." He never solved me, but in the end, I solved him. 2 years after the Dubai dinner, I was giving a TED Talk about linguistic diversity as a security asset. Afterward, a young woman approached me, her eyes bright. "My boyfriend says I'm wasting my time learning Georgian," she said. "He says it's not commercially viable." I took her hands, much as Zara had taken mine. "Learn it anyway," I said. "Then learn the language of finance, and the language of law, and the language of your own worth. Be a mystery to anyone who would try to make you small, but never, ever be a mystery to yourself." She's now my protege at the Al Tahan Foundation. She speaks 5 languages too. As for me, I still study languages. I'm learning Mandarin now, not for business or strategy, but because I love the way it paints pictures with characters. I traveled to Moldova twice a year, funding music programs in villages like the one where I was born. I've published a collection of my poetry under my own name. And sometimes, when the Dubai night is particularly clear, I have dinner with Zara in her majlis. We speak in a tapestry of languages: Arabic, Romanian, French, English, weaving our conversations into something beautiful and strong and entirely our own. That dinner in Dubai was both an ending and a beginning. An ending of a life lived as decoration, a beginning of a life lived as architecture, building, creating, supporting weight, and sheltering meaning. If you're listening to this and someone has made you feel that your mind is too much, your curiosity inconvenient, your capabilities threatening, learn anyway. Grow anyway. Document everything. Build your own server, your own network, your own foundation of knowledge. Because the moment will come at a dinner, in a meeting, during what seems like an ordinary Tuesday, when you'll need to speak all 5 languages at once. When you'll need to be the mystery that solves itself. And when that moment arrives, you won't just survive. You'll finally, gloriously speak.